Dr. Renu Khator, Chancellor of the University of Houston, what's the biggest problem that people like you have when they think about the future of education?
Well, it's actually a double-sided problem. One is trying to see how is it that higher education provides access to so many individuals and so many who may not have college education as their number one priority on their mind, to reach out to them. But at the same time, the other side of the coin for me is how is it that you keep American higher education competitive in the global marketplace, keep the excellence, innovation, and creativity at the forefront.
What's the best thing about American higher education?
Well, there are several things. Actually, I've been asked that question repeatedly recently when I went to India, and that allowed me to do a lot of reflections. I think the fact that universities have a place of their own with as little intrusion as possible, and professors and thinkers have academic freedom. I think both of those, the model of governance and this creative space, I think those two things are very unique about American higher education.
When did you go to India most recently?
I was there in March. I went there. I had the privilege of meeting with the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. We had discussion about future of higher education in India. I met with many business leaders, many vice chancellors, and of course I had the privilege of visiting my tiny little hometown, and they're just also very proud. They just feel somehow it's a collective community's accomplishment, and I'm very gratified.
Has there ever been an Indian as president or chancellor of a university in this country?
Not for a major research university. I don't believe so. I believe I'm the first one.
What impact does that have on your friends and your former countrymen?
Well, I think everybody's just so elated that sometimes I feel scared even. In Tampa, where I was before, I mean, it was just like a huge celebration. They just all thought that this was an accomplishment of the community. I came to Houston. Houston has a large Indian population, and I cannot even tell you how open and welcoming and embracing they have been. If I accept every invitation, I think for next 4 months I don't have to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner myself.
We'll come back to your travel to this country originally, but first tell us about the University of Houston. How big is it?
Well, University of Houston was founded in 1927, so it's about 81 years old, and it's 57,000 students. It's a system of higher education, so there are 4 separate institutions. They are all separately accredited. There's a main campus. I'm president of the main campus, but I'm also chancellor of the University of Houston system. And it's about, let's see, there are 220,000 alumni. It makes an annual economic impact of $3.1 billion on the region every year. And 80% of our students stay right there in the region. So it is a very important university for Houston.
How much is the budget for a year?
It's over $1 billion.
Now, you spent 22 years with the University of South Florida.
That's right, 22 and a half.
The last 4 as provost? Is
That's
that
right.
Why did you make the switch, and how did you get the job?
Well, I was provost for 4 years and 7 months, and I believe the national average for provost is somewhere around there. So once I was provost for about 2 years, I had many universities reach out to me and asking to consider presidency or chancellorship. I wanted to make sure it's a right fit, because that's just so important for me. I wanted a university that's a metropolitan, because I really do believe in that mission. And I wanted a public university. I wanted a global university. And Houston just seemed to fit the bill. So that was a university that excited me when the opportunity became open and available. And I believe after the national search, they felt the same. So I think I'm a very unusual choice for Texas, a very unusual choice for even Houston. But I compliment the board and the university for making that decision.
Who runs the board, and who makes up the board?
There are 9 members of the board, and all 9 of them are appointed by the governor. So the final decision is made by the board.
And your first day on the job was when?
15th of January.
So it's brand new.
It's brand new.
Where were you born?
I was born in Farrukhabad. That's in northern India, about 220 miles away from New Delhi. It's a very small town.
What was life like for you in the early years?
Well, let me see. Life was actually great. Childhood was absolutely wonderful. My father actually was an attorney. He passed away 3 years ago. My grandfather was an attorney. They were a very privileged family in town. So I grew up in a lot of care and comfort. My father always made sure education was very important. My mother always made sure that whatever I did, it was outstanding. She would put her heart and soul in it, no matter what little project I got from the school. And today, as I look back, I think both of them gave me tremendous amount of values, which is whatever you do, just put your heart and soul in it, and try to do your very best and do with care and comfort. And I think, so that's what it is. But you asked as to what else it was. Back then, in my little town, I probably saw only 4 or 5 movies because there were just a couple of movie theaters. I did not go out very much because my father always wanted to make sure I had an escort, and everywhere I go, this driver will take me. So I grew up in a kind of privileged environment. But transition to here was wonderful. It was just a...
What was your religious base?
I'm Hindu.
And what does that mean compared to any of the other religions that are practiced in India?
Well, interestingly, India has... Hindus are predominantly in India. About more than 80% people are Hindus. I grew up in a town that's name is Muslim, and among a population that's largely and quite a large number of people there in Farrukhabad were Muslim, so I was very tuned to the Muslim faith. But then I went to a missionary school. So I really grew up in tri-faiths, Christianity and Islam and Hindu religion. So I practice Hindu religion, but I have great respect for all of these religions as well.
How do women figure in the Hindu religion?
Well, traditionally, from religious point of view or from historical point of view, women have always enjoyed a very important, very prominent position. There are gods and goddesses, multiple of them in Hindu religion, and many of the goddesses are female characters. And actually the most predominant ones are goddesses for courage and victory and war. So the traits are pretty much mixed between men and women in India, and that's the kind of environment I grew in. But that's on the sort of a more historical, cultural, theoretical side. And on the practical side, I really didn't have any role model in terms of seeing any woman in my family or even in my town or my extended family who has either gone to school even after marriage or was in any kind of career at that time.
What year did you marry?
In 1974.
How old were you?
I was 18.
And I read that it was arranged.
Yes.
Explain that.
Well, I actually graduated from college, and I wanted to go to a master's program, but my town did not have an all-girls college that provided education for masters. So I really insisted I wanted to go away from the house, and my father was not very keen on it, and I can understand why, because it just wasn't an acceptable thing. And then I got a scholarship from Government of India, and I insisted. I said, I really want to go now and study at Allahabad University because I wanted to do political science, and that was the place for political science education. Finally, my father gave in and sent me there. But about 8-9 months later, driver came to the dorm, residence halls where I was, and said that you called back home. And I thought my mother was not well, I came back, and actually this whole family was at home, my future husband and his family, and I cried and I said, I absolutely want to study. I do not want to get married. And my mother said, basically, it takes 2-3 years to really find the right match. I mean, they're just here to see you, and it's okay. It's just a short meeting, and it'll be over. And you go back and you study. So I agreed to do that, and I guess I was in room with my future husband for probably 29 minutes. That's what he says. He must have been keeping count. I wasn't. And then my mother gave me a nod. I left the room, and he and his mother, who were there, decided that was a good fit and good match for him, and he said yes. And my father thought that was a good match. He said yes, and I cried and I said no. And my husband likes to joke around. He says it's a democracy, 2 out of 3 votes, and we got married. So it was an interesting story.
Now, is that a tradition that's normal for families?
It definitely was at that time, and even today I think most of the marriages are arranged, although they do give a little more opportunity now for young men and women to meet and get to know one another, but most of the time the future husband or wife are introduced by the family. At least it's a pretty much norm in my family.
Now, by the way, your father and mother upper class Indians?
Yes, very much so, actually.
Successful financially?
Very, very much so.
How well did you live?
Very well. Actually, my house is a 3-story, 40 rooms. We were 5 of us with 7 servants to serve us, so it was a very privileged childhood that I had.
And by the way, you are married to the same man today?
Yes, I am.
How many years?
Whatever it is now, 34. We had our 34th wedding anniversary just about 2 weeks back.
This may sound crazy that I asked this, but did you ever fall in love with him?
Yes, I am very much in love with him even today, and I did fall in love with him very quickly because if you meet with him, he's just a wonderful man. He really is. And just love just grows on you. I mean, I love who he is, and I don't know. People ask me many times, when do you think you fell in love? And I said, I really don't know. Probably the minute it was decided it was going to be, I think I started to fall in love with piece by piece, everything about him. So.
Where did your father, and was it your father that found him? Where did you
yes,
find him?
Actually my uncle lived in the same hometown, and my uncle informed my father saying that here is this young man. He's studying in the United States, and he's coming back for a month on vacation, and he thinks that could be a good match. So my father came to see him and then invited him to come home to see me, I guess.
What's his name?
Suresh.
And where was he studying in the United States?
At Purdue University.
Studying what?
He was studying Ph.D. He was doing his engineering. So I followed him after we got married, and within a couple of weeks after getting married, I was with him here in West Lafayette, Indiana.
Go back, though, to the scene. Did you have any idea at all when you came back home from school that your father was about to introduce you to your new husband?
No, absolutely no, zilch, zero. I had no idea. That's why I cried so much. And actually, after it was decided I was going to get married, and I was engaged the very same day, I did not eat for 10 days till I got married. I went on hunger strike to protest it, and it had nothing to do with him at all, or the concept of marriage, because I knew one day I was going to get married the same way. It simply had to do about my deep, deep, deep desire to do Ph.D. I somehow had that hunger in my belly to study and to get the highest degree possible. So I don't know why, I can't explain it, because I didn't have role models for me, but that's all I wanted to do.
But where had they, found this man, and had your father had his eye on him, or your uncle had his eye on him for a long time for you?
Well, uncle, the family was, I think, in proximity, so my uncle kind of knew and didn't know very much, though. And generally, typically, what happens is when they think there is an eligible match, they ask for a resume. So my uncle asked my dad to send my resume, which my dad did with a photograph. So that went to my, I guess, future in-laws, but nobody knows at that time because probably people send resumes many places. And then my father also sent a copy of the resume and a photograph to my would-be husband here in West Lafayette, Indiana. So I asked him later on, I said, how come it just took you a couple of hours to just say yes? Because typically people don't do that so fast. And he said, well, I had your photograph in front of me for a couple of months, and I just fell in love with the photograph.
Now, what happens when he was introduced to you, if he didn't like you? Could he back out at any point?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Totally his call.
Oh, yes. It is anticipated, actually, because he did not bring his dad with him. And that is your bailout, to say simply, oh, we are going to go and consult with father. But he and his mom just decided to take the action and say yes. And because they had 35 resumes when he arrived in India to go and look over and do whatever. And he just decided he doesn't have time for all of that 35, encounters. And he likes what he sees, and he says yes.
So he picked you out of 35?
In file, yes, but he saw only me.
But when you did you apply for the job at the University of Houston as chancellor?
Yes, I was contacted by they had hired search agency, and search firm contacted me and asked me if I would be interested. And I was also contacted by a couple of people from University of Houston who said that take a look at this presidency. It's a really great place and something that you will really enjoy. And then I did a lot of my homework, studied it thoroughly, and decided, yes, I would put my name in it.
Did I read correctly that there were 200 applicants?
That's typical. May have been definitely over 100, I'm sure. I don't know how many they had. Maybe.
So in the end, though, I mean, this is an interesting, these two selection process. In the end, at the University of Houston, why do you think they picked you?
Well, they told me they picked me because I had fire in my belly.
Is that a good old Indian expression?
Maybe. But apparently they did interview 4 candidates, and I was expecting from my side, well, first they narrowed down, there was a search committee that narrowed down to 8 candidates. They brought 8 candidates to meet with the search committee that included faculty, staff, students, alumni, and board members. And then they invited 4 back to the campus, actually to a hotel, because it was not even in the campus, to a hotel, because they don't want to have the search process be very exposed. And I was one of those 4 candidates, and in my mind, I was anticipating being invited back if I was still in the race, along with my husband, because it's a job, it's a dual job. You want to make sure your spouse also can carry on this. But
and what does he do now? What's his?
He's a professor of industrial engineering. But apparently I left from there, and that very same evening the board met and voted and decided I was their pick. So it happened very fast for me in both cases.
But, you know, I read in a lot of the material about you that there was a reference to they want you to take this school to the next level. You see that so often in schools. What, in the case of the University of Houston, is the next level? Okay.
Well, you know, I did a lot of study and went to all national databases for universities to see exactly where University of Houston is. And I also studied every possible state database to see exactly what all kinds of measures. And I could see a lot of potential. However, when I came to Houston, I decided, you know, I really need to hear from the community. It's 4.5 million strong community out there. So we rolled out a plan called 100-day plan. I said for first 100 days, I will be out everywhere I can be, and I'll solicit input. Come and give me my charge. Tell me, what do you want to see happen at the University of Houston? I got close to 12,000 suggestions. So then we had to sort them out. And there were little rocks, and then there were big rocks. And the big rock idea was they were absolutely hungry for University of Houston to become a nationally competitive research university. So we've done a lot of analysis on that. Exactly how would we know we have arrived? What is it that we need to do? What's the distance? What's the fuel? And I think it is totally possible for University of Houston to really become a top-tier public research university that offers a top-tier learning environment. However, in order to do that, it's going to take a whole community. So now I'm back after 100 days with the community and saying, okay, I heard you. This is what you said. And now this is what your responsibility is in order to make it that greater university, which means the philanthropy from donors, more participation and engagement from alumni. It means more ownership from the leadership of the city and the region. It means a desire for the state legislature and the governor to see another top-tier university in the state of Texas. And also I visited our congressional delegation, and I tell them it also means what could it do to the country. And so far everything I hear is very positive. It seems like the stars are aligned, but it's a long path and a long journey. And the proof of the pudding will be when we taste it, when we see everybody pulling together.
What's the biggest major, and do you have PhDs and masters and the whole gamut of degrees?
Oh, absolutely. It's really a very classy university, even though it was established with a very different purpose. Somewhere along this journey, they've really built a fine university. Generally, commuter universities, I mean, it was called a commuter university. It is no longer a commuter university because we do have 5,000 residential dorm spaces. We're building another 1,000, and we'll build more, 2,000-3,000 more. But generally, you will not find the caliber and quality of faculty that is here. Generally, you won't even find one member of the National Academy, for instance. Well, we have 9 National Academies.
What does that mean? What's the national?
These are the top cream of the faculty anywhere. Very, very, very small percentage and number.
Who determines gets to be in the National Academy?
This is the academies. They nominate people to come and be part of the academies, and they're just a couple of hundred people, around. So the member of being in the National Academy means you have really made it in your field. You are among those very, very selected in the world. We have 9 of them. And we have a Nobel laureate on our faculty. We have Pulitzer Prize winners. We have Tony Award winners. I mean, extremely, extremely great faculty. At the same time, there are some programs that are also ranked in the top 10 in the country, top 3. I mean, hotel and restaurant management program at Houston is ranked number 2 in the country. Same thing is true about the entrepreneurship program. There are law school, business school, the social work, creative writing. I mean, there is excellence all across. But what is missing really is some elements that have to be really paid attention to, tweaked in order for it to be recognized as being in Tier 1 research universities.
How much money do you get right now from the federal taxpayer for the University of Houston?
From federal,
Yes.
you mean in
Federal
terms
grant,
of contracts and grants?
For research?
Yes, it's about close to $50 million.
How much does Texas get, or Texas A&M?
Well, they got quite a bit. I mean, both UT Austin and Texas A&M, their total contracts and grants are above $300 million. And
Each?
yes.
From the feds?
Right.
And
I mean, not from the feds, a total.
Total. So what's it going to take for you to get more federal grants?
Okay. The federal grants really don't come, for instance, to law, to business, because these are not the areas that require that kind of intensive research investment in equipment and in all kinds of chemicals and training and clinical, things like that. There are 2 horses based on which any university has really been able to get more federal grants. I mean, either you need to have a big engineering program, big and strong, like Purdue, for instance, or you need to have a medical school or a big footprint in the healthcare area. Really speaking, we haven't really played a big game in any of those 2, but now that's our future going ahead, because Houston is the 4th largest city, such a vibrant city, it's a global city, and it's the energy capital of the world. So we are quite strong in energy, but that's what we're going to build, an energy university of future. And also we have largest medical facility in the world, probably the largest, or otherwise at least one of the largest, and that's Texas Medical Center, sitting 4 blocks from us.
Is that MD Anderson?
No, MD
it's
Anderson
not.
is part of it. Baylor, MD Anderson, Harmon Hospital. I mean, there's 17 entities in Texas Medical Center, which is the largest medical facility in the world, sitting right there. And they have invited us to be a big player. We are a player, a small player, and I think our future means that we will need to create a bigger footprint in that area, in health area, with or without medical school, because there are so many areas in healthcare that is still, are so much in shortage and demand and need that we can really do a whole lot. So I think there is a pathway for us.
I want to go back to the earlier story,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Okay.
First of all, why did you get interested in political science? What introduced you to that?
Well, sometimes people inspire you. I think out of all my teachers, my teacher for political science was just very inspiring.
Where?
During my college days.
Is that?
I was in my little hometown. Actually, the college I went to was just so new. It was a couple of years old for my bachelor's degree, and I'm glad they opened that so I could at least go to college. It was just a tin shed and just some really not even cemented walls at that time. But my professor for political science was just very inspiring, always kept telling me, you can do anything you want to do. She'll bring me the books. She'll bring me English books, even though my medium of instruction was Hindi. So when I came here, I really didn't have proficiency in English.
Did you speak any English at all?
I could not speak at all. I could read with a lot of difficulty because I had taken English as a subject, but had no practice either in speaking, listening, or writing, or any of that.
Are you still in touch with that political science
Yes.
professor?
I sure am.
Where is she now?
She's in my hometown. I just met her when I was there in March.
And you went on then to get a political science degree, master's, political science degree, Ph.D.
Yes.
Well, go back to, you're 18 years old.
Okay.
10 days later, after being introduced to your now husband, you got married.
Yes.
What was that like? What was the ceremony like? And did you ever give up on this? I mean, you said you cried for 10 days.
I know. I cried because I really wanted to study, and my would-be husband, after engagement, he did ask to speak for 5 minutes. So my father allowed for him to speak with me for 5 minutes, and he said, I don't understand. You don't seem happy. He said, I'm so happy. Why are you not happy? And I said, it's nothing about you at all. I said, I really want to study. And he said, but we are going to the land of opportunity. We're going to America. You can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. And he said, I won't want a wife who doesn't have aspirations. I would want you to study. And he said, I promise to you. But the thing is, since I've never seen a role model, I just didn't think it would ever happen. But he kept his promise. He tutored me. He read 8 drafts of every research paper I wrote just to check my grammar. I mean, he really is responsible a whole lot for pushing me and for moving me ahead. And anytime I have gone to the next level for my promotion, I think he has been the proudest person on earth, and he's very proud of me today.
When you were at the University of South Florida, was he there also?
Yes, he was. He was a professor there. Actually, he was the first one recruited there. I followed him there.
But he followed you to the University of Houston?
Well, he says technically he did not, because he started his job a day before I did.
Oh. Well, go back to, you're 18 years old and you're married. Did you take a honeymoon?
Not really. This America became our honeymoon. I guess we are still in a honeymoon.
When did you leave India?
Probably another 1 week or so, because he only went home for 5 weeks of vacation total. So another week later, I think as soon as I got my passport and visa, we left.
Where did you go?
West Lafayette, Indiana.
And what did you do when he was getting his PhD? What did you do when you arrived there?
Oh, within a month, he took me to the graduate advisor at Purdue in political science department. And he translated my dialogue with him, and I said, I want admission for master's. And he said, well, you're not old enough, and you probably should do a couple of years of bachelor's degree. And I can understand why, because I was not able to even speak English. And as argumentative and as rigid-headed as I am, I said, but I finished my bachelor's. I have my degree here. I want to do master's. I was doing my master's. So this professor, Frank Wilson at Purdue, who was the graduate director at that time, he passed away, unfortunately, too, a couple of years ago. He said, okay, I'll let you take 2 classes, sit in there and see how you do. If you pass, then we'll talk about it. So I sat in 2 classes. I took 2 classes, and I worked like I've never worked in my life. I watched 8 hours of television a day just to get comprehension.
What television?
I Love Lucy, Andy Griffith, Dick Van Dyke, just so that I can comprehend even English, because I couldn't even get the accent. And
But how did you, in watching those programs, how did that teach you English?
Well, I could at least understand some English and some I could follow from the actions, because if I just went to watch news, which I did too, although I didn't understand, and that is simply because there was nothing for me to put together in a context. So those shows really gave me a much better sense of language. So I started picking up, I started enjoying, and started watching more and more and more and more. And 2 months down the road, I mean, I came there, I think in probably, I landed in West Lafayette in July, and in August I was in master's classes.
Did you understand the classes when you sat in there?
Not the first one at all. Actually, left the classroom crying, and my husband said, "What happened?" And I said, "Well, I didn't understand anything at all." And he said, "Well, let's go talk to the professor and see." And this professor actually was from Texas, and with a very heavy Texan accent. And he says, "You know what? It's okay. You'll get to it." He says, "I understand why you aren't, getting it." So then, he encouraged me to just go and talk to professors individually. And, it just took me maybe 1 month, I would say. And then I started but I would read a lot too. I mean, I never went to class without having read that chapter from first page to the last page at least 3 times. So
how did you understand that, though?
Well, because I knew the grammar. I could read with a lot of difficulty. And then I'll ask my husband. He'll translate it sometimes, some things for me.
What did you speak at home with him?
Hindi, because I couldn't speak English.
And what were your grades in those 2 classes?
I got both A's.
Well, that would probably drive people in that class crazy who got B's and C's, and they say, "How does this woman do it?" How did you do it?
Well,
I mean, in other words, people who can speak the language
because
normally.
people spent 3 hours in the classroom. I spent probably 20 hours for the same 3 hours, because I read the chapter 3 times before, I read the chapter 3 times later on, and I didn't even have that time technology to tape the lectures or any such thing. But basically, I then followed from the books. Then I would visit the professor, and they were always very nice. During their office hours, they expect the students to come.
Did you participate in the discussion in class?
Yes, I had to make my presentation, which I did. But otherwise, in a free-flowing conversation, probably not. And the reason was because by the time I'll formulate the sentence I want to say from Hindi, converting into English in my head, the conversation has just moved on. So I really could never do a lot of interactive for first couple of months. But then I got a little more courageous. And by the time I was leaving from there, finishing the class, yes, I could do conversation, but I did form a study group. So everybody helped me. Basically, that's what it is. But
meanwhile, you're married for a couple of weeks in the process, and you don't even know the man, and you're in a different country. Had you ever been overseas before?
No, never. I never sat in a plane before.
And then in a class and speaking a language, any advice for others that are confronting the same problems?
I would just say have fire in your belly, because that fire will keep you moving, and just have passion.
Where did you get the saying that is attributed to you for life, saying that when life gives you lemons and everyone else is busy making lemonade, think about making margaritas? Where'd you get that?
I don't know. It just came sometime many years ago, actually, because I love margaritas. And but after that, somebody did bring me a card or send me a card that had very similar line to it. So I have no idea. They took it from me or I took it from them some point in time. I have no idea. But it just conveys the method. It's one of the many analogies I use.
How many children?
2 daughters.
Now, where are they?
Both of them are ophthalmologists. And one is, she's also a glaucoma surgeon. She did her fellowship in glaucoma, and she is a partner in practice in Sarasota, Florida.
And are they married or single?
She is married. She married her sweetheart from high school, 9th grade. They both started to date. He's not Indian. He's Caucasian, American, Florida boy. And they got married 5 years ago. It's just a great guy, and she's just a great gal. And the younger one, she just is completing her residency in another 2 weeks from Emory in ophthalmology, and she's going for glaucoma fellowship to Wills Eye Institute.
So, I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but you didn't arrange the marriage for your daughter?
No, not for the first one, obviously, because in ninth grade, actually, that's pretty early, even for Americans, I would say, to say, I want to go see a movie with this, boy in my class. When she came and said that, I said, oh my gosh, starting already. And my husband said, well, you deal with it. So they dated, and they just dated each other for 11 years and got married. So,
what is your attitude about the arranged marriage idea? Is it a good or bad idea?
well, it worked great in my case. I know in many cases it has worked great. I know in many cases it has not worked great. The reasons Indian marriages do work very well is because it's the expectations you set. It's just the expectations are not just a romance. I mean, the expectations are it's a marriage and you're going to make it work, and sometimes, and a lot of time actually, woman ends up sacrificing as well. So what would I say about it? I think I would not arrange marriage for my daughters, the younger one who's there now, simply because it's just too much of a responsibility. But at the same time, I won't want her to do it all by herself either, because it doesn't bring in the wisdom that I have seen in the Word. So many times I tell her, this is what you need to look in the guy, and she's very good. I mean, so I hope it'll work out between the two of us. We'll figure it out.
I told you before we started, I'm reading this book by Fareed Zakaria, which is a bestseller. He's an Indian by birth, American now, the post-American world, and it's all about globalism, and one of the subjects that you spend a lot of time on. Rather than talking about his book in particular, if you were going to tell the American people what you saw in India this time around, and what you know about this country, what would you say the future for this country is? I mean, 'cause we're getting a lot of warnings that India and China are growing so fast that there's going to be some very heavy competition there.
Well, competition is never bad. That's what we learn. That's one of the values of this country. In globalization, naturally the capital and labor will flow to its advantage position. So the kinds of positions and jobs that have gone to India are where India has competitive advantage. The important thing for us is not to cry about what kind of competition is being created by other countries, but to focus on what kind of competitive advantage we have in this country and strengthen that. In my view, higher education has always been a competitive advantage in this country. Innovation, creativity have always been a competitive advantage. The freedom to think, the freedom to take risk, always have been competitive advantage. So for America to stay competitive in this global world, it's not going to be by keeping other countries down, but it's going to be by developing where we have our competitive advantage. And that's why I think higher education is so critical. And it's the other side of the coin, as I said, which is keeping America competitive in the global educational marketplace as well.
What year did you get your Ph.D.?
I finished in '75. I finished my master's, so after a year and a half. Then my husband and I went back to India.
For how long?
5 years. And during that time, 2 daughters were born. And then I decided to come back here 5 years later. And I came back to Purdue. And with a 1-year-old and a 3.5-year-old, I started my PhD at that time. So I did my PhD in 1986. January.
What did you do during those 5 years in India, and what did your husband do?
He worked for 2 different places there. One was, sort of a more higher education training type of place, more organizational development kind of an institute, and then he went into a private industry. But during that time, I worked within a company there as well for a short time. Then once I got pregnant, I knew I had to stay home, and so I picked up writing. So then I started writing fiction and poetry and publishing, which I still do in India.
What kind of, in India?
Yeah, in Hindi. I write fiction and poetry in Hindi, and I publish it in Indian magazines.
What kind of, give us some storyline of it.
Most of the time they are like person like me, which is mostly a person who has really left the country and is now in America. And those are the kinds of stories I like to read as well, because there is a commonality of experiences that people like me or the first generation or the immigrants, they face. So most of them are relating to that.
Have you written your own story in the fiction way?
Not yet, but one of these days I think I will. Right now I just don't have any time.
Now, are you an American citizen or?
Yes, I'm an American citizen.
Do you have dual citizenship with India?
I do not. India does offer. I think I might take my Indian citizenship back as well, but right now it's only American citizenship.
Do you
I have.
sell your fiction in India? Or is it?
No, I do not sell. I basically write right now for magazines, the very popular magazines, because it is reaching out to the millions of people. I reach out to a selected group of people with my academic writings here. So my desire is to be able to write. When I want to write, feeling like I have wings, I can float. I don't have to really quote citations or anything like that. Just a very free-flowing writing, and want to reach out to the millions. That's the time I turn to either fiction or a couple of proses also I've done, or poetry. But then also is to keep myself in touch with my language.
Why don't you publish that in English?
So one of these days, I probably will. I'll probably write a story, and I mean, I write otherwise for other things here.
What's the difference between our political system in the United States and India's?
Well, first of all, this is a presidential system. India is a parliamentary system. In India, it's a one-person prime minister. You give all of the powers, the executive, legislative, judiciary. Seems sometimes everything falls within the prime minister, not judiciary, but it seems sometimes. In other words, you have one person to hold accountable, and when things go wrong, you boot the person out. I mean, here it's separation of power. There are three separate groups, and sometimes the executive says the legislature doesn't do this, legislature said executive doesn't do this. So it's the two different models. Most prevalent model in the world is parliamentary system. The other difference clearly is a two-party system here. It's a multi-party system in India. I mean, it's generally the parties, the governments are built now by coalition government. There was time when there was dominance by one party or two parties, and now it's all multi-party. And there are many other differences like that, I would say.
In 20 years from now, what will India look like compared to where it is today?
Well, it depends what India is able to do between now and 20 years. Because one of the things I see which is very heartwarming to me is to see how easily India is embracing the latest of technology, the latest of global challenges. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I go there once or twice a year, and I still say, oh, wow, I didn't see this before.
Give us an example of something you see there that you don't maybe not see here.
It's like cell phones, for instance. I mean, the servants there who would come there and take your, I mean, even like the vegetable seller. In my hometown, the milkman and the vegetable seller, they come to your doorstep to really sell you fresh produce. He has a cell phone. So I can call half an hour before and say, this is what I want. So if he doesn't have it, he'll find from neighbor and bring that vegetable. To me, that kind of embracement of technology, even though the person has absolutely no reading, writing skills, even he's illiterate completely, but uses cell phone. So India is very good about embracing that. But at the same time, I also see that this whole technology and globalization is really not trickling down to the people. And there is a whole section that is not touched in many, many ways in terms of their poverty. And I think if India can deal with that, can really create porous organization where benefits and privileges of globalization are really coming down to the common people, I think it would be a phenomenal place. But if they don't, then they have some serious challenges on hand too.
In Fareed Zakaria's book, he says the most acute problem of plenty is the impact of global growth on the natural resources and the environment. Mm-hmm. It is not an exaggeration to say that the world is running out of clean air, potable water, agricultural produce, and many vital commodities. Do you see that here? Do you see that in India?
I see it everywhere. I see it here. I see it in India. Most definitely I see that. In my hometown, when I was growing up, we never thought about water. I mean, it was there all the time in taps everywhere. Today, the water comes only for 1 hour in the morning, from 5 to 6, and for 1 hour in the evening, sometimes half an hour in the evening. That's it.
In your hometown?
In my hometown.
Even in a home of privilege like yours was?
Well, in the home of privilege, they have their own system. So in my home, my brother's system, when the water comes, everything gets stored underground in a tank with a bigger size pipe that he has been able to get, and then everything is transported back to the top of the house water tank, so that when we are there, we don't feel a difference. The water is there in water taps all the time. But for people in general, it only comes in the morning, you store it in drums, you take shower during that time, and if you somehow slept, you have no water left for the whole day. So for water to be there all the time, and now for it to be there only 1 to 2 hours a day, electricity is gone every day from 8 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. I can see those issues very clearly. The water table is dropping. But it's not just about consumption in India. We have to realize that. It's about consumption in the entire world, and particularly industrialized world. We are, in this country, responsible for the problems that we see in other parts of the world. We are all part of one world, one system. So yes, it's a great challenge, there's no doubt.
Did you ever think, by the way, you studied political science, a Ph.D., did you ever think you might want to run for political office?
No, actually there was time, long time ago, when I was doing those 5 years when I was in India between my master's and Ph.D., that I was approached for a safe seat to run, and I said, no, I study political science, I would stay with my science. So no, I don't think so.
Back to Mr. Zakaria's book, and I read this because it is a bestseller right now, and some Americans don't like what they're hearing here, and I want to get your perspective on it. Nationalism has always perplexed Americans, Mr. Zakaria writes. When the United States involves itself abroad, it always believes that it is genuinely trying to help other countries better themselves. From the Philippines and Haiti to Vietnam and Iraq, the natives' reaction to U.S. efforts has taken Americans by surprise. Americans take justified pride in their own country, we call it patriotism, and yet are genuinely startled when other people are proud and possessive of theirs.
Well, I think this is true for every country. I won't just blame Americans for it, but at the same time, you know, this whole approach, and this is not just necessarily American approach, it has been, many scholars have written about it, is the approach of developed countries, that if we are going to developing countries, we are going there to help them. The fact is, knowledge is bilateral, multilateral. There are best practices, there are things that we can learn, always. We can learn from Africa, we can learn from Latin America, we can learn from Europe. And if we go to other countries thinking there is a culture, there's a local culture there, which is very rich. And if you impose something that is not conducive and synergized with the local culture, the chances are it will fail. However, if you take an idea, listen to the people, and see what also you can learn for yourself, as well as trying to share with them and let them adopt what is adoptable for them based on their local culture, I think we can be more successful.
Speaking of culture, at the University of South Florida, where you were 22 years and provost for 4, what role did sports play there? What change did you see when you became more nationally known? And then what role will sports play at the University of Houston?
Well, sports play a big role. I'm a big fan of athletics. I was trained at Purdue and Big Ten, and I got involved. I was at a very impressionable age, so I really got into football and basketball very early on. So I love it, I enjoy it, and I enjoy other sports as well. So when we were at University of South Florida, there was for quite some time conversation about having a football team, because there was no football at University of South Florida. And I was president of the faculty senate the year when we actually proposed to have football finally, and we got approval for football. And as provost, I was very much involved. I went to, I would say, every single football and basketball and some other games as well, as long as I was in town. And I took pride in it. I always encouraged faculty and donors. And as a provost, for me to come out and say athletics are important was a very important message also for people. So the University of South Florida football team ranked number 2 in the country. And we saw the immediate impact in terms of people coming to the website or students wanting to apply to the university. So right there you could see connection. We could also see connection in terms of football, increasing philanthropy for the university. And sometimes the saying goes that If you have athletics, everybody will just give to athletics. That's not true. Even in the best, strongest athletics program, only 10% of philanthropy goes to athletics. So it really, when you raise the water, it raises all boats. Now at University of Houston in the 70s, they did have a very strong program. We're building it back. That's one of the desires. The community wants to see a big football, basketball. We have a great baseball, softball. We have very good programs. And they want to see it competitive. But there are many, many elements of what it would take for us to be competitive. So just like for taking research and learning in a competitive mode, I'm doing the same thing with athletics too.
At the University of South Florida in Tampa, how big is the university?
University of South Florida was 46,000 students for all 4 institutions there together as well. And this is 57,000.
And this is 57,000 in Houston. And you say that Houston is what, the second or third most diverse school in the country?
Yes, Houston as a city is 4th largest. University of Houston is either the most diverse or second most diverse university in the country.
What does that mean?
That means that we have 14% African Americans, 20% Hispanics, 21% Asians, and 38% whites. But the beauty is it's not just numbers. What really overwhelms me when I'm there, you can walk for few minutes, 5-10 minutes. You will hear many languages in your ears. Very international, but at the same time, you will see people not together, not Hispanics just talking to Hispanics. They are so melted together. This is the face of a future university of America. Houston is a future of an American city, and University of Houston.
You got to go over those numbers again.
Okay.
14% African American,
Right.
20% Hispanic, 1%
1% Asians,
and 38% white.
somewhere like, and then some international. So it is.
How did that happen?
Houston is very diverse, and Houston takes pride. Houston is a city and a community takes pride in diversity and people's success. I mean, like, I arrived there. I am such a strange person, a strange choice for Texas. Even for Houston, I have been welcomed and embraced unbelievably.
Yeah, but given the diversity of the school, that you'd be a perfect choice.
Yeah, but there are diversity all around as well too. But the fact that I am the first person, well, in the country, forget it, but even for University of Houston, they haven't had, they had a woman president before, they haven't had a woman chancellor and president before either. In Texas, in generally, there have not been that many women leaderships there. I am a different choice for them. And they went with this choice. I'm international. I mean, I am a woman, I am of different color, I am of different faith, I have different accent. I mean, I am a different person. But they embrace me simply because I think the university and the city both celebrate diversity. And looking at now the university that is there, it is a great thing that we provide access and outreach to so many first-generation students. But what we are lacking right now is giving them the biggest dream they can have, and that is to stay right there and be in the top tier or tier 1 public university.
What would it cost to go to your school for a year? Tuition, to start with?
Well, the tuition and fee right now is about $5,100, maybe off a few dollars here and there, somewhere there.
If you live in state.
If you're in a state.
Out of state would be what?
About 15,000, I would say.
And I saw somewhere where you had a year recently of 14% increase in tuition.
No, we haven't had 14%. Tuition was deregulated in Texas about 4 or 5 years ago, because the state was really suffering from economic problems, and at that point in time they decided to really deregulate and let the universities decide what the tuition should be. So we stay very competitive where other research universities are in Texas, and actually if you compare them nationally, we are on the very low side in terms of tuition and fees.
But why is tuition around the country going up much faster than inflation?
Okay, well, it's a very good question and a very good national question. The thing is, first you have to see what is the cost of producing a degree. Okay, if you look at the cost of producing a degree, which is a higher education index, it has really not been going up that high. But then the question comes, if you determine a cost of a degree production is a certain amount of dollars. And the best way to look at that would be private institutions, because they are not getting any funding from anywhere else. What is it that they're charging? The average private university tuition right now for bachelor's is about $23,000. If you think that is the cost of producing a quality degree, then only issue that is left is who's going to pay for it. Would the state pay for it? Would the parents pay for it? Or would the students pay for it? And the shift has definitely come throughout the country, where the state's portion has declined, and then the parental portion is there, but it's declined, and the students end up taking loans to pay for tuition. So that's all this is about. And I keep saying, really, when more and more countries are investing more and more in higher education, I mean, even poor countries where they don't have really food, they are making that choice, knowing that it's important for future. We really need to think as a nation and, you know, in all the states as to what kind of investment we need in higher education. I mean, today, many of the universities, Purdue universities, probably, I don't know what the latest figure is, but very close to 11–12% of their budget comes from the state.
What's the percentage at Houston?
For University of Houston, it's 30% is coming from the state.
And is that going down every year?
Yes.
We only have a minute left. Is it true that you don't have sleepless nights?
Yeah, I actually sleep very well. I really do not have sleepless night because I'm a very transparent person. When I have to make a decision, I make it, I say it exactly, why, and I really don't keep too many skeletons in my closet so far.
Someone said you can be rather direct.
I'm very direct.
How do we know that? At what point do we know you're being direct?
Well, for instance, if you know, somebody will come and I said, well, we need to really increase retention rate. Why is it that 25% of the students, they come in and they drop out in the first year? I said, it's not acceptable. And then people will come to me with different excuses, or this is how it has been historically, and we can't change too much. I said, I didn't ask you whether or not we can change it. I asked you how we can change it. So please go back and get me my answer and bring me more than one so that I know then what is possible. I push myself hard, and I just like to push my team very hard.